Joining us now, MSNBC host Ayman Mohyeldin. Ayman, it's really good to have you. What does it mean for Sinwar to no longer be alive? What does it mean for the Israelis to have killed him? Does this change the movement? Does this change things for this war?
There's two ways to look at it. There's the short-term and the long-term impact. And in the short term, undoubtedly, it is going to change the battlefield dynamics for a few reasons. One, Yahya Sinwar was one of these few enigmatic leaders within Hamas who actually had both kind of a tactical as well as a political side to him. He was the chief architect, if you will, of the negotiations that were taking place between Israel and the Qataris and the Egyptians and the Americans about the release of the hostages. So on the shorthand side of things, the dynamic changes a lot because not only was he inside Gaza, not only was he overseeing some of the operations of the militant group there and the fighters there, but he himself also on the battlefield. That now has been eliminated. That's going to disrupt whatever semblance of the organization remains inside the Gaza Strip. Does it change the organization fundamentally? What we have seen in the past, Katie, a short answer to that is it has not. There have been other senior leaders of Hamas, spiritual leaders, political leaders that have been killed, and the organization manages to elect new leaders, generate new leadership that tends to be more extreme, more hardline, more militant than the generation before. So again, it's too early to see what Hamas does. They have not officially made any comments about the killing of Sinwar early today, but we'll see what they do in the coming days and weeks and whether or not they re-elect a new political leader.
Can you give any insight on the Qatari side of things? Because they've been the mediator between the Israelis and Hamas. Do they change their negotiating position? Do they try to put more pressure on Israel, more pressure on the United States to put pressure on Israel? How do they factor into this?
Well, they've always tried to maintain the position of being intermediaries. Certainly, the Israelis have questioned whether their motivations have been purely as intermediaries or not. The Americans have trusted Qatari mediation in the past. They have proven to be quite reliable in many different fields, if you will, including Afghanistan and elsewhere for the Americans. But when it comes to this issue, they've also had the trust of Hamas's leadership, which, as you and our viewers know, has been mostly in Doha for the past several years. So as a result of that, they've had some leverage over Hamas, but at the same time, they've also had working relations with the Israelis. A lot of the money that was going into Hamas through Gaza was going with the blessing of the Israeli government, with the direct knowledge of the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. How this changes right now is really dependent on the organization, whether the organization chooses a more moderate leader or somehow changes its position on some of the negotiations that have taken place over the last several months. You know, one of the key cornerstone demands of Hamas has been that any release of hostages inside Gaza has to be conditioned on the end of the war and a full withdrawal of Israeli troops and forces from inside the Gaza Strip to the outside. That has been a categorical no from Israel. They said they were not going to do that before the killing of Sinwar. So it's going to be interesting, to say the very least, as to whether or not either side demonstrates some flexibility.
What about the Jordanians? The other day when I had you on, we were talking about the Jordanian foreign minister who was reacting to Benjamin Netanyahu here at the United Nations, saying that Netanyahu was saying there was a ring of fire around Israel. And the Jordanian foreign minister came out and said, we can guarantee Israel's safety. The Gulf states, the states surrounding Israel, if they come to a ceasefire. How are the Jordanians factoring into this, and might they now play a larger role, given what the foreign minister said just a few days ago?
Well, you know, one of the issues, Katie, and you know this better than others in the region, so much of this is about narrative, right? And so for many years, the Israeli narrative has been the reason why we do X, Y, and Z is because we are surrounded by a sea of hostile nations that want to destroy us. And they have pointed to groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran as examples of those types of forces that want to destroy Israel. And so what the Jordanian foreign minister was saying with that statement was that the truth is these groups, and certainly now after the killing of somebody like Yahya Sinwar, as well as the killing of Hassan Nasrallah and Hezbollah, was that this narrative is no longer the dominant narrative, that the countries of the Arab world that include moderate countries like Jordan, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, all of these countries, even Saudi Arabia potentially, Morocco as well, have all come to the realization that Israel is there, they're going to have peace treaties with Israel, that Israel is no longer this country surrounded by a sea of hostile states that want to destroy it. So the excuse or the justification that Israel has over the years undertaken for why it treats the Palestinians the way it does, why it maintains the occupation, why it does what it does, is no longer as strong as it was decades ago.
I'm wondering, can those states, though, can they guarantee safety if you don't have, you have non-state actors that have been going after Israel, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and Iran, which is obviously a state actor, but basically trying to do to wage their war through proxies. Can those surrounding states guarantee Israel's safety with these proxies that are there to continue the fight?
Well, I mean, yes and no. On one hand, you look at the Jordanians, they shot down some of the Iranian missiles that were heading towards Israel a couple of months ago. And they say they did that because Iran was violating Jordanian airspace. But nonetheless, they did participate in what is widely seen an act of defense on behalf of Israel, and certainly with the help of the Americans and others in the region. But the underlying issue the Jordanians point to is that the biggest threat to Israel's security is not what is happening externally. It's the fact that the Israelis, till this day, maintain an occupation. And they point to October 7th as an example of that, saying that the reason why Hamas continues to exist, the reason why there is this resentment, is because decades of occupation have resulted in this festering sense of groups like Hamas. And so as a result of that, so long as you don't address that core issue, nothing on the periphery is going to be resolved, including countries like Iran, which people criticize for exploiting the Palestinian issue, for them going to exploit the Palestinian issue for their own self-interest, not necessarily caring about the Palestinian cause per se.
It does feel like it could be an inflection point for change. Ayman Mohyeldin, thank you so much for joining us.